The elegant boutique shimmered under the glow of golden lights, the air thick with the scent of polished wood and expensive perfume. Rows of glittering diamonds and delicate jewelry rested inside pristine glass cases, each piece worth more than an average person's yearly salary. It was a place where time seemed to slow, where luxury wasn't just displayed, it was lived. Sebastian King never spent much time in stores like these. If he needed something, it was brought to him. If he wanted something, it was acquired without question. He wasn't the type to browse, and he certainly wasn't the type to get sentimental over a piece of jewelry. But today was different. Today, he stood at the glass counter, his sharp blue eyes fixed on a ring, a simple yet stunning band with a diamond that caught the light just so. It wasn't just any ring. It was an exact replica of the one he had lost years ago, a ring that once belonged to someone he had loved more than anything, a love that had vanished, just like the ring itself. His fingers tightened around the cool metal as memories threatened to surface. Memories he had buried deep. He didn't allow himself to dwell on the past, not when he had built an empire that demanded his focus, not when every decision he made had to be precise, calculated. And yet, standing there, staring at the ring, it felt like the past was clawing its way back. Then, a small voice broke through his thoughts. "Hi, sir," a little girl chirped, her tone polite yet curious. "My mother has a ring just like yours." Sebastian blinked, startled out of his daze. He turned his gaze downward to see a young girl standing beside him, no more than 8 years old, her brown curls bouncing slightly as she shifted on her feet. She clutched a small worn-out teddy bear in one arm, her innocent eyes locked onto the ring in his hand. For a second, he thought he had misheard her. His grip on the ring stiffened. "Your mother?" he asked, his voice steady, but carrying an edge of something unreadable. The little girl nodded eagerly, a proud smile stretching across her face. "Yes, it looks just like that. She always wears it. She says it's very special." Sebastian's chest tightened. No, it couldn't be. That ring, his ring, was one of a kind. There was no way someone else had the exact same one. His mind raced through possibilities, each more impossible than the last. The logical part of him wanted to dismiss it as a coincidence. And yet, something in his gut told him otherwise. "What's your name?" he asked carefully, his voice quieter now. "Mia," she said brightly. She rocked back on her heels, swinging her teddy bear slightly. "I came here with my mom. She's over there." Sebastian followed her tiny, outstretched finger toward the back of the store where a woman stood examining a display of necklaces. His breath caught in his throat. Time slowed. The air in the room suddenly felt heavier, pressing down on him as though the walls had just closed in. The woman, unaware of his gaze, reached up to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear. It was such a simple movement, and yet it was enough to confirm what his heart already knew. Sebastian's pulse pounded against his ribs as recognition crashed over him like a tidal wave. "Emily!" The name thundered through his mind, shaking loose, every emotion he had locked away. It couldn't be. It wasn't possible. And yet, there she was. For years, he had convinced himself she was gone. He had searched. He had questioned. And when the answers never came, he had forced himself to accept the silence, forced himself to believe that she had vanished forever. And now she was standing, just a few feet away, completely unaware that her past was about to collide with her present. His heart pounded as he took a slow, deliberate step forward, his mind screaming with questions that had no immediate answers. Was it really her? Had she really been here all this time? And if it was her, why had she never come back? Mia suddenly tugged at his sleeve, pulling him back to the moment. She looked up at him with wide, innocent eyes. "Sir, are you okay? You look like you saw a ghost." Sebastian inhaled sharply, forcing himself to regain control. He had to be sure. He had to know. "Mia," he said, keeping his voice even. "What's your mother's name?" The little girl grinned, as if proud to share the answer. "Emily." The world tilted. Sebastian barely noticed when Mia let go of his sleeve and ran toward her mother. His breath was shallow, his chest tight. Every part of him told him to move, to speak, to do something, anything. But all he could do was watch. As Emily turned at the sound of her daughter's voice, their eyes met, and in that instant, everything else faded. The boutique, the soft hum of conversation, the weight of the years between them, none of it mattered. Emily's expression froze, her soft smile disappearing the moment she saw him. For a second, neither of them moved. Sebastian could see it in her face, the shock, the disbelief, the guilt. The past wasn't buried. It had just walked right back into his life. And this time, he wasn't going to let it slip away so easily. Sebastian felt like the ground had been ripped from beneath him. The air between them was thick with something unspoken, something heavy. Emily stood frozen, her face pale, her lips parted slightly, as if words were caught somewhere deep inside her, unable to break free. For years he had told himself that she was gone, that she had disappeared without a trace, leaving only unanswered questions and an ache that never truly faded. He had searched, fought against the silence, but eventually he had learned to live with the void she left behind. Or so he thought. But now, she was standing right there, her daughter, their daughter, clutching her hand, looking between them with innocent confusion. "Mom," Mia's small voice cut through the silence. "Do you know him?" Emily flinched, blinking rapidly, as if trying to gather herself. She turned to Mia, her hand tightening protectively around her daughter's. I think we should go," she said quickly, her voice barely above a whisper. Sebastian took a step forward. Emily. It wasn't just her name. It was 1,000 questions packed into a single word. She shook her head, avoiding his gaze, as she gently pulled Mia toward it. The door, but he wasn't going to let her disappear again. Not this time. "Wait." His voice was firm, edged with an urgency he couldn't hide. "You can't just walk away." Emily stopped, her shoulders tense, her back still turned to him. He could see her hesitation, see the battle waging inside her. Then, slowly, she turned to face him again. But this time, there was something else in her eyes. Fear. "Sebastian, please," she murmured. "Not here." Her voice was soft, almost pleading. It made something inside him twist painfully. He could see it now. She wasn't just shocked to see him. She was afraid of what would happen next. He studied her, his mind racing. This wasn't just about the past. There was more, something she wasn't saying. "Then tell me where," he said. "Because I'm not letting you disappear again." Emily hesitated, then exhaled shakily. "There's a cafe down the street," she said. "Give me 10 minutes." Sebastian nodded, his heart hammering. 10 minutes. That was all he had to wait. After years of nothing, 10 minutes felt unbearable, but it was better than losing her again. Emily took Mia's hand and left the store without another word. Sebastian stood there for a moment, trying to steady himself. His mind swirled with questions, memories, emotions he had buried long ago. He wasn't sure what he was walking into, but one thing was clear. Emily had been keeping secrets, and he was about to find out why. The cafe was small and tucked away from the main street, the kind of place where people came to escape rather than be seen. Sebastian arrived before Emily, choosing a quiet booth near the back. His hands were clenched into fists on the table, his body tense. Minutes passed like hours before the door finally opened. Emily stepped inside, her eyes scanning the room before landing on him. She hesitated, then walked over, her movements cautious, controlled. She slid into the seat across from him, exhaling slowly. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Sebastian studied her. She looked different. There were faint lines around her eyes, a tiredness that hadn't been there before. But she was still Emily, still the woman who had once turned his world upside down. "Why did you leave?" he finally asked, his voice low. Emily swallowed, her fingers twisting together on the table. "I had no choice." His jaw tightened. "That's not an answer." She looked away, her gaze unfocused. "Sebastian, you don't understand." "Then make me understand," he said, his tone sharper than he intended. "I searched for you, for years. And then, out of nowhere, I find you here, with a daughter who—" His voice caught. "Is she mine?" Emily inhaled sharply, her grip tightening on the edge of the table. He already knew the answer. He had seen it the moment Mia looked up at him with those familiar, piercing blue eyes. "Sebastian." Emily's voice was barely a whisper. "Tell me the truth." She squeezed. Her eyes shut for a moment, then slowly nodded. "Yes." A mixture of relief and devastation hit him all at once. His chest felt too tight, his breathing shallow. "You kept my daughter from me," he said, his voice strained with emotion. "I had to," Emily said quickly, her eyes pleading. "It wasn't safe." Sebastian frowned. "Safe from who?" Emily hesitated. She glanced around as if someone might be listening. "I can't explain everything here," she murmured. "But there are people, powerful people, who didn't want me in your life, who didn't want her in your life." Sebastian's expression darkened. "Who?" Emily looked at him, her eyes filled with something he couldn't quite place. Pain, fear, maybe even regret. "Your family." The words hit him like a punch to the gut. His family. The Kings. Powerful, ruthless, unforgiving. Sebastian had always known his family operated in a world of control and manipulation. He had spent years fighting against it, carving out his own empire separate from their influence. But he had never imagined they would go this far. He exhaled sharply, his hands tightening into fists. "What did they do to you?" Emily bit her lip, looking down. "They gave me a choice. If I stayed, they would ruin me, take everything. And if I tried to fight back, they would make sure no one ever found me again." She looked up at him, her eyes glassy. "I was scared, Sebastian. I was pregnant. I couldn't risk it." His stomach twisted. The thought of Emily, alone, terrified, carrying his child, while he had been left in the dark. It made his blood boil. "They took everything from me," she whispered. "And I thought, maybe it was for the best. Maybe you were better off without us." Sebastian's heart pounded. "You really believe that?" Emily's breath hitched. "I don't know, but I didn't have a choice." Silence hung between them, heavy and unbearable. Sebastian leaned forward, his voice low but firm. "You do now." Emily looked at him, uncertainty flickering in her eyes. "I don't care what my family did," he said. "I don't care what threats they made. You should have told me." Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them away. "Sebastian, it's not that simple." "It is to me," he said. "You and Mia are mine, and I'm not letting them take you away again." Emily swallowed hard. "They won't just let us walk away." Sebastian's expression hardened. "Then they'll have to try and stop me." Emily inhaled shakily. "Sebastian." But he wasn't backing down. He had already lost them once, and he would burn the whole world down before. He let it happen again.